What would you do if you found out your boss sees people's struggles to pay the bills, the fact that they are living in wage poverty, as an awesome opportunity to hire workers, get them to work as many hours as they can while paying them as little as possible? Would you feel angry? Would you quit your job in protest? Would you even be surprised? That's actually what happened to Applebee workers when an email from upper management got leaked. You've probably heard about this. Wayne Pankratz, an executive director of operations for American Franchise Capital, which owns 50 Applebees in the Midwest, sent an excited email to his colleagues that pretty much reflects everything that is wrong with corporate America these days. Let me provide you with a little bit of context here. I've told you this before. During the Great Resignation that started around April 2021, the hospitality industry was hit the hardest. In fact, it had double the quit rate of any other industry. And I guess this in itself shows how wonderful it is to work in hospitality and how awesome the working conditions are, right? But anyways, for hospitality bosses, this meant two things: lack of workers and having to improve what they're offering new workers to be able to hire them. So naturally, this isn't something they're happy about. At the same time, the working and middle classes are really struggling, with inflation hitting record highs of nearly 8%, meaning everything is more expensive. Food, utility bills, and of course gas, particularly with what's going on in Ukraine at the moment and the sanctions on Russia. Now, considering bosses aren't giving out raises according to inflation rates, which in my opinion they really should, it means your paycheck is worth less and less, right? You've probably noticed that already. Things are looking dire, particularly for those who don't earn much, like most hospitality workers. So the enterprising executive director of operations saw a golden opportunity in this and decided to share the good news with his colleagues in an email aptly named "Why Gas Increase is Good for Hiring." Most of our employee base and potential employee base live paycheck to paycheck, Pankratz wrote. Any increase in gas prices cuts into their disposable incomes. As inflation continues to climb and gas prices continue to go up, that means more hours employees will need to work to maintain their current level of living. Charming, don't you think? But he continues, also celebrating the fact that the company no longer has to compete with the government when it comes to hiring, meaning COVID unemployment and stimulus checks have ended, which benefits us as prices rise. People who are relying on unemployment money simply will have less money to spend. It will force people back into the workforce. He also goes on to gloat about how inflation will also force small businesses into shutting down, which means less competition and more workers available to be poached and other stuff like that. You really have to read it. Now, even though this was well received by many of his colleagues, I'm guessing at least one of them saw it for what it was, something disgusting that needed to be shared with workers. And so they did. The email was leaked, and in the weeks since the email was sent, a mass exodus has happened at least one of their restaurants. 4 out of 6 managers and at least 10 other workers either quit on the spot or handed in their notices. One of the managers who quit on the spot printed out the email and distributed it to restaurant employees and customers. It eventually ended up on the anti-work subthread on Reddit, and from there, the whole world knew about it. After a while, Applebee's reaction was to distance itself from the scandal and explain that one person's opinion did not reflect the company's vision as a whole. But after reading some of the replies by Pankratz's co-workers, it's hard to see it that way. Pankratz was eventually fired for the email. But was he fired because of what he said was so outrageous, or because he was caught saying it? Like I've mentioned in the beginning, does it surprise you that managers see things this way? That they see employers as numbers or brute force to be exploited with no empathy or humanity whatsoever? How many hospitality workers do you know that are underpaid, overworked, and mistreated? Or any other worker really? How many people do you know that live in wage poverty, that have to work overtime or find a second job to make ends meet? Is the notion that bosses use low wages to keep workers needing to work to be able to control them that far-fetched of an idea? Did we not know this was going on before this email came to light? That companies with massive profits underpay their workers when they could very well provide them with decent pay but just won't? We figured it was for greed, but maybe it was for control all along. And isn't this what the Great Resignation is all about? About no longer being available to be exploited for someone else's profit, about not wanting to be a part of that rat race anymore, about stepping out of the role society has pushed onto us and putting ourselves and our quality of life above everything else? At a time when workers are more empowered than ever before, did we really not expect bosses to try and fight back to regain power? In the end, I don't really expect things to change after this entire thing. thing, although I have no doubt a lot of promises were probably made to get that restaurant to open again. If indeed hospitality workers start making more money and having better working conditions, it will be because there is a shortage in labor, not because bosses have finally come to their senses and realized they actually need workers for their business to work. After a year, employers, particularly in the hospitality industry, don't seem to have learned much with the big quit. Focusing on labor shortages instead of seeing the big picture is extremely short-sighted at best. Maybe respecting and treating hourly workers better would get them better results than just whining about no one wanting to work. The status quo has changed. Employers no longer have the leverage, and the sooner they realize that, the better off we will all be. An executive director for Wayne Pankrat